Welcome back. Today's topic is transmission capacity and transfer capability. These two are widely used terms in electrical engineering. We have seen in the last 2 weeks that the ISO has immense responsibility in finalizing the access to the transmission lines. So he receives requests from different participants regarding the transmission lines so that they will transfer the power over the transmission lines. Now, the independent system operator, he makes the final decisions of how to access, of how to provide the transmission lines to different participants based upon their requests. But every time he finalizes the transmission line accesses, he performs some sort of simulations on ATC, available transmission capacity. This term is quite different from the transfer capability. And in this lecture, we will see what is the difference between transmission capacity and transfer capability. Now, I hope that by the end of this lecture, you will be able to determine what is the difference between transmission capacity and transfer capability. So, I'll start with the basic introduction to transmission system. The ATC calculations and the posting of these ATC on OASIS is mandated for every control area by FERCR. Actually, this was restricted to United States of America. OASIS is open access same time information systems. So posting of OASIS enhances open access of transmission system and competitiveness in the markets. And users can access this information and request the services on OASIS. Now, after reading this entire slide, you might be wondering what is this open access of transmission systems, right? As already said, the transmission systems should be very transparent in nature, and the ISO should offer these transmission services to different participants. Now, the question is, before giving permission to transmission lines, the GENCO also can have a pre-arrangement about the availability of the transmission lines. For this, the FERC, in particularly in USA, they have made it mandatory that the ATC must be made available on regular basis on internet, and it must be available for every participant. Now the question is, what is this ATC? But before going for the concept of ATC, let us have a quick introduction regarding the two terms of transmission capacity and transfer capability. Now, these two terms are widely used in electrical power industry. Transfer capability, it is dependent on system conditions. That includes several factors such as generation, customer load demand, and transmission system topology, like that. So, transfer capability, it varies. But whereas the transmission capacity is more of a technical term, it indicates a thermal rating of a certain component in a transmission network, such as a transmission line or a transformer. So, what actually is a big difference between transmission capacity? That we will see now. Now, let us suppose I have there is a station A and there is a station B, and I have employed it, and I have installed a transmission line between the stations A and B. Let us suppose I do have very clear information about what is the diameter, what is the material, what is the diameter of the conductor, what is the material, and the spacing between the conductors. So if I know all these things, then automatically what I can do, I can know that what is the resistance of this particular material, and what is the current capability, what is the maximum current which it can allow. When I know what is the maximum current which it can allow, because if I increase the maximum current, then there can be I square R losses, and which may hinder the efficiency of the system. So this is generally called as thermal capacity. Normally, all the transmission lines, they are governed by this thermal capacity. Anything beyond this thermal capacity can't be injected into the system, because it may lead to these conductors, they may get damaged if the thermal capacity, beyond the thermal capacity, if the power is injected. So thermal capacity is one of the important terms in power systems, and your transmission capacity is dependent on the thermal capacity. Literally speaking, most of the times both are equal. But there are some other constraints also, just like the stability, etc., etc., which means that the transmission capacity is determined once you design a conductor and install it. So, during designing itself, you will be knowing the transmission capacity of the transmission line. Okay, this transmission line can deliver 500 megawatts to the maximum. So, it is what we call it as a rated capacity. So, transmission capacity is literally speaking the rated capacity. But do we always allow the rated capacity to flow in the transmission line? No. We will be always allowing a power which is always less than the rated capacity. Most of the times the transmission lines will not be fully loaded. They will be only partially loaded. So, transfer capability is one term which is not equal to thermal capacity but a little bit lower than the thermal capacity, and it depends upon different factors like the transmission system topology. We have seen in PSOC that there can be some terms. Let us suppose if this is V1 and this is V2 and this is the X of the transmission line. So what is the maximum power? It is V1 V2 by X is the maximum power, assuming that delta is a 90. This is the maximum power which can be allowed in the transmission line. If you increase the V and increase or decrease the reactance, then this may increase. But to what extent we can increase? If we increase it to a very large extent, then the system stability may differ. So the system may move into unstable mode. So there are other considerations also apart from this thermal capacity which do govern the maximum capacity of the transmission line. And that maximum capacity is called as transfer capability. So the maximum transfer capability is called as a total transfer capability of the machine. That we will see in the next lecture. But as of now, what you need to know is nothing but transmission capacity is just like your thermal rating of the machine, which is the maximum technical capacity which you can load the transmission line. Whereas transfer capability is more of a dynamic thing, which depends upon different factors such as generation, customer load demand, etc. Now, transfer capability in detail, see, it is the ability of network to reliably transfer electric power between the 2 points in the system under certain network conditions. So, it depends upon the demand. Let us suppose if I do have this type of V1 and V2 and I am suppose V1 V2 by X is my maximum allowing transfer capability. Let us suppose that the demand is not there. If I inject more power into the system, what happens? The system may move on to unstable mode. So this is also one factor. You are supposed to ensure that what is the maximum power you can inject such that the system may not move into unreliable states. So the definition states that it is the ability of network to reliably transfer electric power between the 2 points under certain network conditions. Normally, between 2 points, let us suppose I take this Hyderabad and this is Warangal, there can be number of transmission lines between these 2 points, and this entire list of transmission lines is called as a path. This is called as a transmission path between Hyderabad and Warangal. So the transfer capability of a transmission path, which is composed of several lines, is not directly a function of individual transmission capacities of the lines. Try to remember. And one more thing is, this transmission bands may differ when you move in different directions. So it is a direction specific measure, which we will see in the next video lecture. So this transmission capacity will be capability. So the transmission capability will be divided into two things. One is total transfer capability, the other one is available transfer capability. These two terms which we will see in the CDT topic. But do remember that available transfer capability from 1 to 2 is not equal to available transfer capability from 2 to 1. So for more information you can go on through this websites, and I hope that you are now able to differentiate between the transfer capability and the transmission capacity.